Do you think Salamanders suck in Warhammer 40k? If you said yes, you're wrong. So, a lot of 40k players think that they're losing because of bad matchups, bad dice, or weak armies, but most of the time, that's not the problem. The real issue is going to be how those units are being used. So today, we are starting something completely different from what you've seen on Warhammer 40k YouTube. We're going to diagnose a faction that most players think is underperforming, and we're going to figure out what's actually going wrong. This is the exact same thought process that I used to use when I did my 10 years working as a chiropractic neurologist, and I would be treating patients with traumatic brain injuries from all over the world, whether it was blast injuries or sports accidents or even more tragic style accidents. So I would use this thought process where I would diagnose the underlying issue below the surface level symptoms, and then we would come up with really creative solutions to fix those patients. Well, we're going to do the same thing for a lot of really underrated detachments in the game. This is Detachment Rescue. And today's patient is the Salamanders, because on paper, they look slow, they look durable, and kind of average, but in reality, they're being completely misused. So we're going to break down what's actually wrong with the Salamanders detachments, which would be both the Firestorm and Forge Father Seekers, although they're pretty close to the same. There are some important differences. And more importantly than breaking this stuff down, we're actually going to prescribe the exact way that you should be playing them if you want to start winning more games. So, let's freaking get into it. All right, here's the core identity of your Salamanders. You're just not a durability army, and you need to recognize that. A lot of people think that power armored armies are because you have power, you have a 3-up armor save, you're durable. Ain't true. Ain't true at all. So if you're a Marine player and you're like, oh, why can't I ever survive? It's because you're not durable. You want to know what durability is? A Satan. That's what durability is. You and your 3-up armor save body are not durable. People think that you're like this power spike army, but the reality is that what you are is you're actually this army that just murders the crap out of something really, really quickly, and they focus fire it down. And one of the really cool, unique things accessible to your Salamander players, especially whether you're doing Forge Father Seeker or Firestorm, is that you can do this on multiple units in a turn. Most Marine armies focus fire down one unit using like the Oath of Moment target. They're really good at nuking one unit. Firestorm can do this in multiple places due to their unique mechanics. So let's buckle in and let's figure out how we're actually going to use this to serve ourselves. So the first questions that you need to ask yourself, guys, is you need to ask yourself, are you running Firestorm or are you going to be running Forge Father Seekers? And the real answer to this question, in my opinion, is going to be Forge Father Seekers. But here's how you're going to answer for yourself. You are going to go ahead and either say, I want the Champion of the Humanity Enhancement, or I want the fall back and shoot stratagem. That's really what you're arguing about. So if you're playing this in Firestorm, you can take a 10-point enhancement, which is probably the best enhancement in the entire game, and put it on any Tacticus model. And you can just give that unit ignore modifiers, which is so incredibly powerful. Ignore modifiers to hit, ignore modifiers to wound, ignore modifiers to damage, ignore modifiers to literally everything. You would ignore armor contempt. You would ignore everything. It's so incredibly powerful. As a matter of fact, it's so powerful that you can take this enhancement, put it on a lieutenant, have that lieutenant attached to a unit of Blade Guard veterans, and perhaps with, Ajax Agatone, and that squad will one-tap a Satan. That's how powerful that is. So the way this whole stacks, just for those of you guys who are curious, you take the lieutenant, he gives lethal hits to the Blade Guard vets and Ajax Agatone himself. You put Oath of Moment on the target so they get to reroll hit rolls. So you're going to be +1 to wound. And Ajax Agatone gives the entire squad reroll wound rolls. Now suddenly that Satan is no longer -1 damage, so he's taking an honest 2 damage from each Blade Guard veteran that gets through, 2 damage from your Lieutenant's Power Fist, and 3 damage from Ajax Agatone himself. With full rerolls to wound, you actually kill the Satan. This is an incredibly powerful ability. So that's Firestorm. But what do you give up to go to Forge Father Seekers? Well, in Forge Father Seekers, you get fallback and shoot, which is really powerful. It's a very, very big deal, especially for an army that's so focused on shooting. Not to mention, you get some ancillary benefit where your Infernus Marines can actually do, actions and shoot at the same time, which is quite useful because in this detachment, you're always going to get +1 to your strength when you're within 12 inches. And that means that your Infernus Marines are actually strength 6 flamers with access to reroll wound rolls. So we're going to talk about how this works. So How do you win games regardless of which detachment you run? How do you win them? Well, here's the reality. Most people play Warhammer wrong. This is not an HP detachment or game. This is a VP game. What do I mean by that? Well, you don't win by destroying your opponent. You win by scoring more victory points. Too many people think that you win by your model surviving, or you win because you kill your opponent's pieces. No, you win by scoring more victory points for your opponents, and you do what you need to do to get more victory points than your opponent does. So you have to stage your models really early. You got to force opponents' movement, and what I mean by that is actually dictate board control. If you guys have never seen me do this, well, one of the ways that I like to describe board control is I like to put a Land Raider Redeemer in the middle of the battlefield. Now, a Land Raider Redeemer is approximately, I think it's 6.5 inches long. Someone could fact check me on that, but just go with that stat for this explanation. And he's got a 12-inch radius of roasting the crap out of you with his Strength 6 AP2 damage to flamers that will auto hit. It's going to be 2d6 plus like 6 shots. It's kind of wild how good that is. But because he's 6.5 inches long, this gives you a diameter of, what is that, 13 plus 12 plus 12, so 13 plus 24, which puts you at what, like a 37-inch diameter of a no-go zone. So if your opponent chooses to move any of his infantry models within that 37-inch circle, they die in your opponent's turn. So by having the Land Raider Redeemer where he is, you're literally dictating where your opponent can move. And that is what we mean by board control. So when I say force opponent's movement, that's what I mean, board control. You also have things like, movement, blocking. You've also got screening, which we've talked about in other videos, but blah, 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 blah. I'm just talking about how you actually win the games with these attachments. Hit one decisive spike turn. One of the amazingly powerful things about Marines in general is that we can focus fire the crap out of something that we need to focus fire. But these detachments for Salamanders can do it to 2, potentially even 3 different units, and that is something that's very, very unique and very, very special. And it punishes mistakes unlike basically anything else. Okay, so here's the core engine. Here's how these detachments work. Oh, and by the way, for today's awesome pictures, I chose sugar gliders because they are cute as crap. So that's what you're gonna get these pictures of in the bottom right, in the bottom left-hand corner. Jeez, yeah, left-hand corner. So enjoy them. I hope you love them. If you like the sugar gliders, smash the like button down below. Share it with your friends. We love it. So here's the core engine. Here is everything that you guys need to know about how you're going to pilot the army. Vulkan Histan actually makes these detachments operate, because what he does is he gets to select one freaking unit, one glorious freaking unit, and he gets to say, hey, all of my flamer weapons are going to get full rerolls to wound against this particular unit. So screw this guy in particular. That is his entire freaking deal. And the only requirements for that is that he has to be within 24 inches and see the unit that he's giving you full rerolls to wound. So he's effectively giving you like Flamer Oath, or like Wound Roll Oath, which is really, really powerful. This also applies to melter weapons, by the way. It's not just torrent weapons, but so all torrent, all melter weapons. But yes, it's a incredibly powerful ability. He also gives you like a OC of 10 and a Field of Pain of 4 up when he's on a particular objective. So the way we do it is we take Vulkan Histan, and we are always going to be running Vulkan Histan, most likely always, with a unit of company heroes. It gives his unit that sweet -1 to be wounded. They've got a good armor save. Suddenly they've got a lot of OC on an objective. It's a very, very strong unit that you're going to like in your army. Okay. Anyway, what Vulkan does is he points at that unit in particular, and they get screwed. You stack this with your 2 CP stratagem. Yes, 2 CP stratagem, but it gives you devastating wounds on any of your torrent weapons. These torrent weapons are freaking powerful in this detachment, because don't forget, they do get +1 strength when they are going to be within 12 inches of your opponent. They also get assault, so you can always just advance to get within 12 inches of your opponent. And then if you happen to be within 6 inches of your opponent, you can also spend 1 CP to give yourself +1 to wound. So you don't even need to use your Oath of Moment target to get the +1 to wound, because you have another way of getting +1 to wound in this freaking detachment. This means that you can get a Strength 7 Land Raider Redeemer with +1 to wound, with full rerolls to wound, potentially even with devastating wounds if you want it. That means that you have a Land Raider Redeemer with more or less twin-linked flamers that are wounding big nasties that have a toughness of 12 on 4s. That's a big freaking deal. Now, we're going to extrapolate this to other units that we're about to show you right freaking now. And so these are the damage combos, and then we're going to talk about moving up the tabletop a little bit more and why you might choose one unit of the other. So here's the delete button. You've got a couple different options. I'm going to list you 3 options, but you can come up with a few more on your own if you want, but this is the pros and cons. Basically, you want a lot of flamers with a lot of wound rerolls with +1 to wound, and you really, really want devastating wounds. So, VanVets plus flamers plus buffs. If you take a 10-man squad of VanVets led by a captain with jump pack, most likely, suddenly this unit has native deep strike. They can rapid ingress for free because you got a captain who discounts the ability. And then in your turn, you can just move 12 inches. You can also advance if you want, but most of the time you want to move just 12 inches. Flame the crap out of people because you're going to have 11d6 hand flamers because you can put hand flamers on all the Vanguard veterans. Yes, I'm aware most of the time people want invulnerable shields, but you're going to want the hand flamers just because of the sheer ludicrous amount of damage you are about to do to your opponent. That captain himself has a enhancement that will grant you +1 attack to your flamer weapons. Yes, it is a ton of attacks. So it's going to be, 11d6 plus 11 shots. Now, are you starting to see just how much trauma this can happen? When you add in the either +1 to wound stratagem or +1 to wound from an Oath of Moment target, just depends on what you're trying to kill. That enhancement is called Immolator, by the way. You get full rerolls to wound from Vulkan and Stan. You're going to deal about 12 damage into a Satan with this. That is a stunning amount of damage into the toughest unit in the entire freaking game. This will also then enable you to charge into something with a shocking amount of lethal hits that can also be at +1 to wound. This unit is brutal, and the reason why we like it on Vanguard veterans, even though it's actually not the highest damage output you can get, is because then they run in and they slap something in melee, because don't forget that captain will also give them +1 strength. So they run in with, 40 attacks at strength 6 with lethal hits. And if you're going into your Oath of Moment target, they're killing the crap out of it. So what this unit can actually uniquely do is you can take, one super big nasty right here and another super big nasty right here, oath one of them, and that's the one you're going to charge to kill, and then shoot the other one to death with your full rules to wound, fishing for devastating wounds. And since you're led by a captain, that 2 CP stratagem might only cost you 1. That is the glory of this unit. It's so freaking powerful. And yes, by the way, I'm well aware that it will die in your next turn. But if this unit by itself picks up 500, 600, 700 points of your opponent's army, that's a lot. That's a lot. And it's not actually by itself. You're always going to have certain supporting aspects to it, right? Like, I mean, maybe there's one other thing that also shoots the Satan to finish it off or whatever. And then let's not forget the glory that you have then an 11d6 plus 11 shot Overwatch when your opponent wants to move into you in your next turn. That is a lot of Overwatch potential. So this unit, freaking amazing. Great. Now you can also run this a little bit more powerfully with a unit of Infernus Marines, because Infernus Marines, when they get the +1 strength, they go to strength 6, which is a huge breakpoint for flamers. Suddenly you're winning all elf bodies on, or guardsman bodies on 2s. Remember, these ignore cover, so things like guard recon, who get like a 3-up armor save when they use all their buffs, they don't get it because you ignore cover, so they don't get the additional benefits of cover, and they have a detachment rule that gives them even more benefits if they have cover. So it's very, very powerful. But in addition to that, it also means you're wounding like Terminator style bodies on 3s, and you're wounding Custodes style bodies on 4s, and you're wounding most monsters and vehicles on 5s instead of wounding them on 6s. Of course, you can always stack this with +1 to wound from either your stratagem or +1 to wound from Oath of Moment. It's a lot. So anyway, this unit right here, if it's 10d6 plus 1 shots, you're going to deal 16 damage into a Satan on average with just this one unit. Not to mention, you're also going to you won't force a battle shock on them because it only works on infantry, but you guys understand the damage potential. Then their Overwatch is absolutely brutal for basically anyone who wants to come anywhere near them. So it is an incredibly powerful unit that works really, really well. One of the ways that you would deliver it would be like, say, if you're inside a Land Raider, the Land Raider can move up, you get out, you blast like a mofo. You can then even still charge. If you have a kind of a fighty character, you can have them like finish things off. It's a very, 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 very powerful unit. It's really not all that expensive for what it does. Then lastly, the other unit that you really like to do this combo with is going to be the Aggressors. Now, the Aggressors are going to be weaker. They're not going to hit as hard as the other two units, but the key with them is that you don't need Vulkan to activate their reroll wound rolls because they just natively have twin linked flamers at d6 plus 1. So it's going to be 6d6 plus 1. Strength 4 goes up to strength 5. You can also be plus 1 to wound using the strat. It auto hits. And they can just fish for those wounds right off the back. They will do like 9 damage into a Satan with their flamers. Now, great. So if your specific goal is to kill Satan, you wouldn't do aggressors. But the cool thing is that if you wanted to take aggressors and VanVets and Infernus Marines, you could actually do this in multiple places. Vulkan can give full rerolls to wound over here. The aggressors will get their native full rerolls to wounds over here. And then you can also just have something else that is oath-momented that you're going to go attack with your normal stuff. So this is a huge amount of damage and trauma that you can implement upon your opponents. And that's really where you want to be leaning in as far as damage is concerned. So basically, while I did that entire explanation, I kind of already leaned into how to use the delete button. The benefit of the Vanguard veterans is that they start in deep strike and they could just kind of rapid ingress into the ideal position. The benefit to doing it with like Infernus Marines would be like that they can do that shooting and then still do an action in this detachment. Since in Forge Fathers you can action and shoot with your Infernus Marines, meaning a Land Raider could move, you can disembark, so you can go like up to 15 inches with the entire unit, roast the crap out of something, do an action, and then still overwatch on your opponent's turn. There's a lot of utility there. So basically, but you're going to be running all of your buffs together to try to make all of this stuff work. That's really what you're trying to do here. All right, let's talk about some of these pressure pieces. In this detachment, we love our Land Raider Redeemer. I already gave the idea of how your Land Raider Redeemer really gives like board control, but how do we really use it? Well, let's find out right freaking now. That Land Raider Redeemer is controlling space. It is telling your opponent that if you move into X position, well, your opponent's gonna get roasted. Roasted bad, like not in a good way, in a bad way of getting roasted. So that's really what it does. Not only that, but it also projects a insane amount of threat range, because let's say you do have that unit of aggressors inside and you have that Land Raider Redeemer, you could just move up 12 inches, disembark, because you disembark 3 inches. Those aggressors just move 15 inches. They could roast some crap and then still charge. And then once they kill their thing, because remember they have Twin Link Power Fist, that could be +1 to wound because you have access to +1 to wound on demand in this detachment. Basically, I mean, you have to be within 6 inches, but it's not that hard for these units to get within 6 inches. And then they can charge, and they can crush something, and then they're free to overwatch the crap out of something. So with their twin-linked flamers that are +1 AP when they're shooting the closest enemy target, it's absolutely disgusting how much damage these aggressors can do in this detachment. So that Land Raider is a delivery mechanism. It's a board control mechanism, but it's also a much bigger threat in this detachment than is in other detachments because it has assault. So your opponent can't just simply pre-measure your 10 inches with a 2-inch rotation and then say, cool, you won't be able to shoot me from here, because you can always roll a decent advance and then you get to hit something that your opponent just was not ready for you to hit. Not to mention, in the current meta, Land Raiders are actually a really, really decent option for the first time in quite a while, because everyone is teching to kill Satan, just like the examples I previously gave you. So why is that awesome? Well, let me demonstrate. Into Satan, what's really good at killing Satan? High volume, lower AP damage. That's what's really good into Satan, and that's what everyone is trying to figure out how to kill right now. What type of unit loves high volume, low AP shots? Land Raiders, dude. They're T12. They got 2-up armor save. You are going to pop smoke on them, and you can also pop armor contempt on them. They love high volume, low AP damage. So they're actually, even though the meta is kind of teching for like monsters and vehicles, they're teching specifically for Satan, which is a very different profile than a Land Raider. So it's one of these weird things where it's like we're kind of in an anti-monster meta, but we're not in an anti-Land Raider meta. It's a little bizarre. But anyway, they're very, very good, and they have some very good durability as well. So that's what we're doing with the Land Raider in this detachment. All right. What we're doing here is we're moving into the freaking midboard, kind of like we've spoken. We're using our rapid ingresses to deliver those Vanguard veterans, and we're forcing our opponent to respect our threat ranges. Because if our opponent's, like we demonstrated with the Land Raider, if our opponent is just going to measure, check the line of sight and say, oh, okay, cool, if you move 10 inches, then rotate 2 inches because you're a Land Raider Redeemer, then you won't be able to see me. But with a 1-inch advance, now suddenly you can see him. And you're severely punishing your opponent's overextension. You're using all of your mechanics to make sure that your opponent can't just sit there. They have to respect what's coming their freaking way. One of my favorite ways to do this with Marines is to use Scouts. Scouts are 70-point units that have OC5 that you can very easily spam. It's one of the cheapest units available to Codex Space Marines, and it can be used for move blocking, controlling the board, They can uppy downy for our secondaries. But what I honestly typically use them for is my turn 1, turn 2 objective denial. If my opponent's staying on a natural expansion, I'll put my 5OC scouts on there to deny them that objective so that they cannot score their victory points. Yes, that typically means that those scouts will die. Who cares? My opponent didn't score victory points. I'm trying to score victory points. I don't want my opponent to score victory points. Then I win. If my opponent wants to move on to the opposite side of the wall to kill scouts, I'm going to overwatch the crap out of them with Landry Redeemer, Vanguard Veterans, whatever. And I'm going to force them to dedicate too much into killing my crap, which is really, really dramatically going to punish them. All right, let's talk about some of these utility and scoring units a little bit more. So we already spoke about the scouts, but let's talk about the Infernus squads in the Forge Father Shakers. These guys can do actions and secondaries at the same time. That is profound. They can also advance and do secondaries. You can have a 5-man Infernus squad inside an Impulsor, a fire truck, if you will. That Impulsor can advance, get the Infernus Marines out onto an objective, score your cleanse, your established locus, your whatever that you need to score, do your terraform action, and then still roast the crap out of an opponent that was unfortunately a little too close. This is brutal. That can also force battle shocks, which is even better. Then they're set up to overwatch the crap out of your opponent when they move in your turn as well. This is amazing. So these guys are here to score. They're here to screen. They're here to support your spike turn. That is a lot. Let's say we do have that one squad of, Vanguard veterans who go to murk a Satan. You give them their devastating wounds. They fish their rerolls, blah, blah, blah. And they get, okay, cool. So that Satan took their 12 damage. They got 4 wounds left. Guess what your 5-man unit of Infernus Marines with +1 to wound, with 4 rerolls to wound, does into a Satan? They cause the extra, 5-6 damage that you actually need. They can also, of course, throw that grenade. So that's a really, really great thing that they can do. So they can throw the grenade, do an action, still shoot. Super, super valuable. All right, so here's why most players fail. When most players are running this detachment, because I recognize this detachment doesn't have the best win rate. I do understand that. Most players play too freaking passive. You trade units instead of looking to go for a knockout punch, right? So what you do is you're like, oh, how do I give you my 200-point unit of whatever for your 200-point unit of whatever? That's not relevant. You're going to lose that game. Your Marines, you don't trade well. Instead, you knock out what needs to be knocked out, and then you just score victory points for the rest of the game. Remember, you cannot focus on killing if you're not focusing on scoring. It's much easier to focus on scoring and then have your opponent have to try to outscore you, which gives you the opportunity to punch them really, really freaking hard. I always recommend focusing on scoring before killing. You've heard me say it before. I'm going to say it a million more times. This is a victory point game. Victory points is your condition for winning, not health points. I don't care if you kill nothing if you get more victory points than your freaking opponent. So here's what I want you to do. What is my spike turn? You're going to ask yourself these questions right now. When you're playing a game, what is my spike turn? When do I have to drop down and kill the Nightbringer? When do I have to drop down and kill the whatever that needs to be killed? And then you need to ask yourself, is the threat of you bringing your unit out more valuable than actually attacking? Because remember, if your opponent has that super valuable unit, but you have the counter to it, your counter is stopping their super valuable unit from abusing the battlefield. But once you've thrown your counter out there, then they have a license to put their super valuable unit out into the battlefield as well. So you have to ask yourself, is it more valuable for me to keep this threat in my pocket to force my opponent to play more reserved? What does the score look like? If you're up on points, keep that threat in your pocket. If you're down on points and you have to make something happen, sometimes you got to make something happen. I do recognize that, but you have to ask yourself that question. When I play my orcs and I have all of my transports really aggressively staged, my opponent knows the WA is coming. So many times my opponent will just kind of back up a little bit to make sure that my WA is not that effective. The most powerful thing I can do as soon as they do that is just not WA. And then my opponent goes, oh, crap. Because now they're a little bit further away and they can't really interact with me quite as much as they wanted to. And then they're going to have to make the decision, do I come forward now? Because if I come forward now, he's going to wah. But if I stay backwards, he just won't. So he gets into this damned if he does, damned if he doesn't scenario. This is the same thing I want you to think about with Salamanders. Is your threat more powerful than actually pulling the trigger? Okay, cool. So that's it, guys. Here's the final principle. You don't win by surviving. You don't win because all your models live. You win by punishing mistakes and creating a victory point differential. This detachment is freaking awesome. Utilize these combos, these strategies, and make sure that you use your unit at the correct opportunity. I want to give a really big shout out to the Devin from Play on Tabletop. He's actually the founder of Big Smoke Wargaming. This is not a sponsored segment anyway, but he just recently wrote a pretty good article on Reddit, which big surprise. That's actually quite surprising, where he was kind of detailing how this detachment works, and it really inspired me to kind of talk about some of the really cool things that Salamanders can do. So if you guys like this, go check out the post that he read. I'll link it down below so you guys can. And with that, I'm gonna take off. This has been Detachment Diagnosis, Detachment Rescue. How am I gonna say it? Anyway, Crumping is out. Hope you all have a great, amazing day. Crump on. Bye bye.